Shalom uvracha, and apologies for my voice being a little bit hoarse, but I'll do my best. The sins of the first generations of Sefer Bereishis, from Adam to Noach and so on, are all sins of a refusal to take responsibility. Adam HaRishon, after he sins, he tells HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he tells God, it's the woman that you gave me. She caused me to sin. Meaning, he doesn't take responsibility. In the generation that was wiped out by the flood, it's a generation that didn't take responsibility for the sustaining of the world. It says in the Pasuk, Ki hishchis kol basar es darkei ala aretz, meaning they didn't behave in a natural world. They didn't take responsibility for the continuity of the world. Even Noach, who was a tzaddik, a righteous person in his generation, Noach, after the flood, he planted a vine, he got drunk, and he escaped, as it were, from taking responsibility. It was only Avraham Avinu who began to take a new responsibility for the world, for the goodness in the world, and therefore Chazal say that he took the reward of all of those generations that preceded him. And the question is, what does this lack of responsibility have to do with the effect that we find in all of these generations of a deep flaw in the connection, an untenable situation for human society? Right after they left Gan Eden, Cain murders his brother, the first murder in history immediately after the departure from Gan Eden. Later on in the generation of the flood, in this week's Parashat Noach, we find that there was chamas meaning theft, behavior between one and another that makes society untenable. And of course, the peak, the zenith of this process was in Stoim ve'Amorah, where people behaved like they behave in Stoim, with a completely uncaring attitude between one and the other, people caring only about themselves. Why is that connected to this lack of taking responsibility? The answer is that our responsibilities draw from our relationships. Because we have friends, because we have family, because we are spouses, because we live in a society, all of these place upon us duties, those duties that uphold those relationships, friendships, family, community, society. And of course, the first among these connections, our relationship to Hashem, the relationship between us and God, that from there draws the obligation, the duty to uphold the Torah, to uphold the mitzvahs, in order to maintain that relationship, that covenant between us and God. The same is true of our interpersonal relationships. If we don't uphold those duties, those responsibilities, then the relationship itself will disintegrate. The relationship will not be able to be upheld because each person doesn't fulfill the duties that draw from that relationship. That's why in these generations, from Adam HaRishon through to Avraham Avinu, we find a lack of responsibility and we find a social disintegration until Avraham Avinu comes and he takes the full responsibility for the sustainability of the world, for the goodness of the world, for the tzedakah u'mishpat, the charity and the justice within the world. And we, his descendants, have the duty to carry on his path, to make sure we take our responsibilities seriously and ensure that our relationships with Hashem and interpersonally are good and pure. And this is relevant in Israel this coming week, because this week is an election week. And even though many are saying, why should I vote? What's the point? It's not going to make any difference, and there's nobody good to vote for. But we are all in this together. One society, one state. And therefore it's our duty as members of a society with whom we each have interpersonal connections to do our basic civic duty and to vote. And even though we might not think there's a great option here, but there's always an option that's better than all the others. It's our duty, because of our relationships with one another, to do our best for the good of the society in which we live. And the way in which we can do that in a democracy, among other ways of course, is to cast our vote at the ballot boxes. We should take that responsibility. We should all vote for the good. We should have a wonderful Shabbos.